This video is brought to you by Vincero. What's up, Wisecrack? Michael here. Today I want to talk about something we've all been watching, a story that explores America's founding principles by adding a hefty dose of hip-hop: Parks and Recreation. You likely think of Parks and Rec as a show about small-town government, woodsman libertarianism, or the dangers of doing business with the Saperstein family.
The worst. She's the worst.
But what if it's an accidental masterclass in the struggles of founding a new country? Now, to say Parks and Rec is a show about America's founding might sound like a stretch, but remember the co-creator Mike Schur is the same guy that made an entire sitcom about philosophy.
It's like who died and left Aristotle in charge of ethics?
Plato.
Okay, even if Mike Schur wasn't reading the notebooks of Thomas Jefferson, his comedic musings on life in Pawnee may help us learn more about a very basic problem for people trying to start a country from scratch. That is, how do you stop it from collapsing in on itself? Welcome to this Wisecrack Edition on the political philosophy of Parks and Recreation, and spoilers ahead for the show and Hamilton. But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Vincero. Vincero watches are stylish, bold, and built to last. They are handcrafted and have the same feel as a luxury watch, but at a fraction of the price. Right now, I'm wearing the Chrono S in black, and I really love how the watch elevates any outfit, even if you're in a t-shirt and jeans. This past year, Vincero has released 4 brand new collections, including an automatic movement watch called the Icon, a rugged explorer watch called the Outrider, and a sleek race watch called the Apex, which includes a limited edition marble release that will be sold out soon. To celebrate the release of their new collections and their 6-year anniversary, Vincero is holding their biggest sale ever. You can get 30% off your entire order by checking out the link in the description. And hey, since summer is in full swing, you might as well check out their sunglasses while you're there. Find out why Vincero has over 22,000 5-star reviews by getting your own Vincero accessory today. Click the link in the description and take advantage of this year's biggest sale with 30% off your entire order. Now, back to the show. Parks and Rec follows the inner workings of Pawnee, Indiana's Parks Department, headed by Ron Swanson and his overeager deputy Leslie Knope. Leslie has an almost childlike admiration for American-style democracy, and believes that with good-natured leaders, the government has the ability to make our world a better place. However, she is surrounded by people who are at best apathetic and at worst downright hostile to her grand plans.
I don't want this Parks Department to build any parks because I don't believe in government.
Leslie is thwarted at every step as she tries to build a park where an empty pit once stood, take on Big Sugar, or stop people from drinking from water fountains like assholes.
Yeah, so the idea is to make a fountain that he can't do that to.
Before he was famous for being a deft Broadway lyricist, Hamilton, along with James Madison and John Jay, wrote a series of articles meant to sway public opinion towards the creation of a unified nation of states through the Constitution and a strong national government. You know, the United States of America. These articles, referred to as the Federalist Papers, were responding to existing criticisms of the proposed union and preempted any yet to come. And while the stakes of forming a union out of 13 individual states and throwing a Pawnee unity concert might not be quite the same, these early debates about American government can help us better understand what's really going on in Parks and Rec. So let's start with problem 1, the danger of factions. Whether you're a local parks department or the head of a national government, there's one thing you gotta watch out for. Different groups of people, all with very specific interests, all yelling at each other in a way that devolves into chaos.
No, you promised!
You promised? That's not fair.
Oh, wait, it's not a question of fairness, it's separation.
Go back to Russia, commie.
Hey, you go back to Russia! And you go back to wherever you came from!
If you're a student of Pawnee's town hall meetings, you might have noticed a theme. No matter what level-headed plan Leslie unveils, there is some person or group who feels like their rights as an American have been trampled upon.
I mean, what's next? Income?
Sir, you don't pay your income tax?
Whether or not I pay income tax is none of the government's business.
Try to make Pawnee healthier, and this guy is mad he has to go out of his way to the nearest paunch burger.
Now, if I want to start my day off with a triple-decker pancake breakfast pizza, I gotta go to the one that's 10 minutes away, and that makes me 20 minutes late to work every day. I work at home.
Have you ever considered not eating that for breakfast?
I'll never consider that.
During these meetings and throughout the show, Leslie and the Parks Department are met with an onslaught of hyper-specific and constantly annoyed citizens and interest groups who are never satisfied with anything.
There is a disturbing lack of benches in Ramsey Park.
These factions, in turn, trample on the rights of others, like when seniors can't learn how to not catch chlamydia because it offends the Society for Family Stability Foundation.
If we allow this filth to be taught to our seniors, the next thing you know, it'll be in our high
high schools, then our kindergartens, and before you know it, we have babies in thong underwear. Is that what you want?
Yes, that's what I want.
Believe it or not, it was exactly this kind of chaos that James Madison was trying to avoid by creating a federal republic to unify the states. Sure, he might not have meant bench people, but he was acutely aware of how, say, one religious group could tyrannically impose their will on others. Madison, in Federalist Number 10, defines a faction as a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interest of the community. While Leslie's chipper attitude tries to solve the problem of factions with inclusivity,
So, what I hear when I'm being yelled at is people caring loudly at me.
Madison argues that the solution to factions is to either destroy their cause or limit their effects. And while removing the causes for the factions sounds convenient, Madison points out that the only ways you could do this would be by destroying the liberty that lets factions exist in the first place, or more creepily, giving every citizen the same opinions, the same passions, and the same interests. In other words, if Leslie simply indoctrinated everyone into her binder cult, there would be no pesky Jeremy Jams trying to put a paunch burger on her beloved park.
I want to sell this lot to Paunch Burger. Here's why. We make money, they make money. They make burgers, we eat burgers.
Since removing the causes of factions isn't really an option, how does one limit their effects? For Madison, factions are especially bad in smaller republics. Local politics makes it easier for super rich neighborhood weirdos like the Newports to impose their will on an entire area. If you go bigger, Madison thought, the competing factions might balance each other out a bit. But then again, he didn't really foresee the rise of the internet or multinational corporations, but that's a video for a different day. Parks and Rec, on the other hand, has a novel solution to a certain kind of factionalism in the time capsule episode. In this episode, a man with a creepy Twilight obsession wants to get the book put in the town's time capsule to impress his daughter. The town hall meetings, predictably, spiral out of control as groups and individuals with misaligned interest all fight to have the Bible, weird paintings, and dead people's ashes included in the project. We can get a little Madison in here.
Sure.
Since it would be a huge overstep to try to eliminate the source of people's feuding about whether Twilight is demonic propaganda or an important cultural touchstone, the role of government is to develop mechanisms for controlling the fallout. One of Madison's solutions was to have a space for the rabble to express their grievances, while making sure the system kept their shenanigans contained. In this light, we might consider the town hall meetings as an important pressure valve for public sentiments.
What are you, some kind of moron? Why don't you have hand dryers in the park bathrooms? They're so much more sanitary than paper towels.
Letting the people air their grievances might just keep the weirdos from lining up outside City Hall with muskets. And weirdly, this is a huge mechanism of the Constitution's design, letting all the chaos and anger of a democracy be expressed without giving in to the actual unfiltered will of the people. There's two ways we can look at this. On one hand, having just survived a revolutionary war motivated by a factional dispute between England and the colonies, the founders understood the importance of controlling angry minorities who would inevitably be at odds with government rule. On the other hand, they were equally worried about the poor masses, who were larger in numbers than the landowning classes, rising up and taking power from their buddies who owned both land and people. And that's not even getting into how afraid they were of slave revolts, again, a topic for another time. Besides revolts of the poors or slaves, or both allied together, Madison and his fellow Federalists had another problem. How do we convince the skeptical states to join our new union? And while Pawnee isn't even a state, we can see some of the same exact problems at play in Indiana. Eagleton, Pawnee's ritzy neighbor, seceded from Pawnee long ago, disgusted by the filth of the undesirable pores of their neighborhood. That all changes, however, when they go bankrupt. While Eagleton isn't pushing for a compromise over slavery, thank God, they are, like many of the southern states, hesitant to give up their freedoms and rejoin the town of Pawnee. Built over a hot spring with a microclimate all its own, it's an example of how hard it can be to get different cities or states to join together for the greater good. Eagleton is richer, cleaner. The town hall meetings are exquisite.
Look how pretty the people are.
Why would they ever want Pawneeans to come ruining their nice parks? Eagleton is, in this sense, like an anti-federalist state. Unlike an Eagletonian, Leslie Knope sees the value in Pawnee being part of something greater than itself, even when Eagleton is broke and full of condescending assholes.
I live in Eagleton, and frankly, I don't like the idea of living in Pawnee. They're a little, what's the word? Have no money.
And believe it or not, Eagleton's bankruptcy is actually a pretty great stand-in for one specific hesitancy in joining into a union of states: debt. If you've seen Hamilton, you'll remember the definitely historically accurate rap battle between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, in which they used their lyrical prowess to debate the question of whether debts and wealth should be shared through the federal government, or if a state being broke was their own dumb problem to worry about.
Oh, if the shoe fits, wear it. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it? Our debts are paid, I'm afraid. Don't tax the South, cause we got it made in the shade.
This was an important question in the wake of the Revolutionary War, as both the federal government and the states were in massive debt to the tune of $54 and $25 million, respectively. With paper money as useless as stock in Entertainment 720 and no country wanting to loan money to deadbeat America, Hamilton's big idea was to absorb all this debt at the federal level and establish a national bank. For heavily indebted states, this was awesome. But for states like Maryland, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Virginia, who already paid their debts, it meant getting taxed to pay off the debt of your broke-ass neighbors. Somewhat like the debt-ridden states, Eagleton's only way to survive their crushing debt is to be absorbed into Pawnee, forming a new economic union of sorts. Pawnee, since they haven't repeatedly failed to pay back their debtors, ostensibly can borrow more money to build more parks and schools, especially after the keen fiscal management of Ben Wyatt. In the case of the Constitution, the idea was that, say, France would be less willing to lend money to, say, New Jersey, and more willing to trust their cash with a larger and fiscally savvy federal government. So here, Parks and Rec falls on the side of New York-based hip-hop artist Alexander Hamilton, who said that a national debt, if it is not excessive, will be to us a national blessing. But now that we've seen why the Founding Fathers thought that faction should be tolerated and why a union was stronger than a collection of states, the question still remains: is democracy even a good system? Do we really want the type of government that requires years of meetings and compromises to turn a pit into a community park? So here we go with problem 3. Does democracy actually work? We all know that America is a democracy, and democracy is about we the people, so obviously our friends Hamilton, Madison, and Jay got sweet democracy neck tattoos. And for everyone mad that, well, actually America is a democratic republic, zip your burger hole for a second, we're getting there. The founders were pretty skeptical about the whole we the people part of the government, and were downright opposed to a world in which each citizen had a direct say in what's going on. John Adams, in a defense of the Constitution of the United States, flat out worried that unbridled democracy would lead the masses to give up their power immediately to some king or idols of their own creation. He also worried, like Madison, that the poors would start using their power to rob the rich blind, and to be fair, that the rich, when left to their own devices, would simply rob the poor blind. It's worth noting that Adams admired the British form of government, with its balance of powers and representative nature. Parks and Rec, despite being oh so optimistic about the power of one woman to change the world, really dives into the show that is democracy. Their city councilors serving for way too long with their own dumb ingrained ways and clear conflicts of interest, along with the bonkers ideas held by some of Pawnee's citizens.
But isn't all food bad for you? I've been eating lasagna and muffins every day of my life for 40 years and I feel terrible.
It was because of all this messiness that the founders preferred to call their invention a democratic republic instead of a literal democracy. For the authors of the Federalist Papers, commercial republics like ours will never be disposed to waste themselves in ruinous contentions with each other. They will be governed by mutual interest and will cultivate a spirit of mutual amity and concord. A republic, in the eyes of the Founding Fathers, is a system of government which is indirectly controlled by the people, with many barriers between individual citizens and direct decision-making at the government level. In other words, you need a principled Leslie Knope or Ann Perkins to act on behalf of this guy.
I'm not worried about swine flu. I already have the swine flu. I'm worried about the turtle flu.
And rather than hoping for some shared patriotic interest, Hamilton, for one, thought that it was commerce, not democratic ideals, that would be the true unifying force of the Union. To put it bluntly, they figured that people would get over their fights and squabbles if it would keep their bank balance looking pretty. This, in turn, would keep them faithful to the nation, keeping their accounts in the black. While we've more than covered the town halls, we can consider this quote from the Federalist Papers. Are not popular assemblies frequently subject to the impulses of rage, resentment, jealousy, avarice, and of other irregular and violent propensities? Is it not well known that their determinations are often governed by a few individuals in whom they place confidence and are, of course, liable to be tinctured by the passions and views of those individuals? In other words, there's a few jerks who are going to push public sentiment in a pretty bad direction. While the media during their time amounted to rumors spread at the tavern and printed pamphlets, we can see the danger of misguided masses with Pawnee's own gin-soaked Katie Couric, Joan Calamezzo. Calamezzo's talk show Pawnee Today has the clout to make or break local political careers, and it can do this all through using emotions like rage and jealousy to rouse TV-addicted citizens in the service of the absolute worst ideas.
Yeah, how can you justify raising taxes for something that will hurt the town?
But this of course leaves us with the question of whether the founders were correct in thinking that we weren't capable of handling an actual direct democracy and instead needed the barriers of a republic to keep us from ruining things. After all, we've got plenty of problems caused by special interest groups and career politicians. It's not that Parks and Rec is a perfect one-to-one stand-in for the arguments of Federalists versus anti-Federalists, but it can serve as a pretty good lesson in what these people were thinking. But what do you think, Wisecrack? Does Parks and Rec show us the best that American democracy is capable of when well-intentioned folks work together? Or does it instead lay bare the problems and limitations inherent to a system of government developed over 200 years before it was possible to slide into those DMs? Let us know what you think in the comments. Huge thanks to our amazing patrons for supporting the channel and our podcast. And before you go, I'm going to give one last shout out to Vincero for sponsoring this video. Check out the 4 new collections in the site's biggest sale of the year by clicking the link in the description. When you use our link, you can get 30% off your entire order, so take advantage of this giant sale. As always, thanks for watching, guys. Later.